I've watched almost every video that Leila Hormozi has ever produced about hiring, team growth, and delegation, and I've turned all of that research into this beautiful process map that outlines all of her advice in one step-by-step sequence for how to go about hiring the Leila Hormozi way. All right, so this process is going to begin with us identifying what exactly is the role that we're hiring for, and it's going to end with the onboarding process, which according to Leila starts when you actually have an offer that's accepted and you go through all the steps after that. So that's the adventure we're going on. Let's start over here. So the very first step that Leila kind of defines around this role definition that she's harped on in quite a few different videos is around identifying the pain. In other words, figuring out what is the problem this person needs to solve. This is pretty different than what I've seen in other videos that talk about hiring, which really focus more on responsibility areas and tasks, more of solutions. In Leila's videos, she's really stressed the importance of identifying here is what's not working and giving that to the potential candidate. That way people are self-selecting, yeah, I can solve that problem, rather than just thinking about, oh, I can do that task. I thought this point was really interesting and something that was hit on a lot in the How I Manage a $100 Million Team video, which you'll see me citing a few times throughout this. In addition to this pain, Leila suggests that we also have two different types of key metrics for this role, at least two. One is the thing we want people to do, and the other is the thing we want somebody to avoid. The idea being that we have two metrics that balance our incentives to make sure that we're really encouraging the kind of actions that we want. An example of these kind of balancing metrics that she gave in one of the videos is having somebody who's responsible for selling also responsible for tracking the metrics around refunds. So that way they're incentivized to sell people who do not generate refunds. In other words, balancing these two initiatives. Again, this topic came up in this $100 Million Team video, and you learn more about this through the lens of feedback by actually watching that video around the 7-minute mark. But we're going to keep moving on to the next area of defining the role, which is really defining what benefits this role has. And according to Leila, there are actually 5 different types of benefits. So here are the 5 major types of benefits that she hit on. In a few other videos I saw from her, she actually covered a few other ones, so maybe there's more than 5, hence the plus sign here. But the big ones we talked about were insurance, health benefits, dental insurance, all that stuff, career path, so the trajectory someone has in their role, what could they be doing next? The work environment, which seems to be kind of a catch-all for the culture, the leadership, the style, the vibe, the dress code, all of those soft benefits. The pay, obviously, that's a big one, regardless of what currency it's in. And then things like 401k, investment accounts, and other kind of financial incentives. For more on these 5 formats of benefits, check out the How to Hire the Best People in the World video from Leila Hormozi. She also covers quite a few other ones in her other videos, but this video is probably the go-to if you're specifically looking at building a benefits suite. One thing I will say though, having watched many videos in preparation for this video, is that if there was one benefit I would focus on more than anything else to be like Leila, it would be the work environment. I don't think this is stressed in her content very much, but when you watch enough of it, you kind of see a through line. And she seems to really have a high level of priority and focus on building out an ecosystem for her staff. This is not so much things that are financial or boxes that you can check, but about building a certain kind of environment. Something about how she talks about culture really reminds me a lot of high-ticket masterminds. I don't know if you've seen this out there in the online business world, but there's a lot of people, these gurus who have masterminds, and they're like, come be among the best and brightest. We'll get together and rub our brains together and make magic because we're all so awesome. The typical mastermind, shtick. But making fun of online influencers aside, I think she has an interesting point here of making your workplace a place, like a hangout, a vibe, a mastermind. Because ultimately, when you're building a company, every person, especially on smaller teams like mine and probably many of yours, every person is in your mastermind that you are working with every single day to try to solve problems, make things happen. If you're a team of 10, every single person matters so much, way more than a team of 10,000. I think this idea of really emphasizing the work environment, the culture, the conversations, the quality of impact, the type of manager you'll have, the kind of conversations you might have, the fact that you'll enjoy talking with the other people that work there, selling this kind of access to a really high performance environment seems to be the biggest benefit she stresses in her content. And I think this is something that small teams and small businesses, we could be learning from. How could we advertise for joining our small team with the same amount of rigor and, pep talk and enthusiasm that the gurus are talking about having you join their mastermind? How can this sound as exciting? Whatever that language is, I feel like that's what this work environment benefit really comes down to. And I feel like this could be a whole video in itself, and hopefully she'll make one. Yeah. But for now, that's kind of what I'm reading from the outside looking in. All right, so moving on to the last area about defining the role, the next thing that Leila would do, just based on these videos, is that she would be assessing what experience level she's looking for. This was covered in pretty great detail inside this EA video you see linked here. Don't let the title fool you. It's valuable even if you're not looking for an EA. And the question that really pulled out from this for me was about experience level. Do you have time and experience that you're willing to spend training up a new person? That's basically the question she presented. And if so, go ahead and hire somebody junior. But if you do not have time, or you do not have experience, or you have them both and you don't want to spend them on this, hire somebody with experience. It sounds like such a simple concept, but I learned this lesson the hard way, and I wish I had heard this earlier on in my hiring journey. Now, that is the last tip from Leila around this defining the job place, but I did want to add one more because I didn't see this mentioned in the video, but I have never seen a high-level operator hire for roles without having this, so I assumed she might just be doing it without telling us in the video. So here we go. The additional piece I added in here in yellow, just to say that it's not original from her, is defining the processes a role owns. So what are the areas of responsibility? This concept of defining the processes in your business is something that we talk more about in other videos, and you can also find a training in the description where I go through how to define the processes in your business. But every operator I know, I imagine, especially at Leila's level, define the processes that they're hiring for in addition to those pains. And so I want to just list that here as one additional step that we'd want to do in our beautiful hiring process. But bam, with that, we have defined the role we're hiring for. Now we're moving on to the next step, according to Leila Hormozi, which is imagining the perfect fit. So according to Leila Hormozi, this is about when we want to start thinking about who this person is. Some components that I suspect may come to play at this point, just based on some of the videos I've seen from her, is defining what goals you have for a person. What should they be doing, thinking, focusing on, and so on? And what qualities does that person bring into the situation? Like, what are they like? What's their vibe? What's their feeling? What are they good at? What are they bad at? A concept I've heard her hit on in a few different interviews is the idea of acceptable weaknesses. Every person's going to have strengths and weaknesses, but can we make sure that that person's weaknesses aren't really that big of a deal for the role, or at least balanced out by other people? That's something she hits on with talent qualities, which is mentioned throughout a few videos. But the real juicy nugget on this one is actually a component of her interview here on Leveling Up, where she talks about how she actually imagines the hire she's going to make before she makes it. And I thought this was really interesting. To summarize the key component from this video, which by the way, watch it if you want the full scoop, she basically imagined in her head exactly the personality, even the physical descriptors of the role she was looking to hire. And she used that when she was interviewing people to try to recognize somebody who matched what she expected that role to act, look, and behave like. All right, moving on, we've got step 3, which is writing the copy for your perfect fit. Now, this is one that is probably not that foreign for anyone's hiring process, but one that is stressed a lot more in Leila Hormozi's content versus other hiring resources I've read about. Maybe because she's coming from more of that marketing and sales lens, as opposed to the traditional operational lens that most of us get into hiring from. But whatever the reason, Leila really stresses the importance of treating your application process for a position like you would any other sales funnel in your business. You want to have great copy. You want to have avatars. You want to focus on the person's pain and how your job, in this case, would solve that pain. And that's what's happening in this step here. We are trying to write the perfect sales pitch, essentially, for our perfect person, which means we need to identify who our perfect person is. We need to write a job posting that doesn't just describe what the role is, it needs to resonate with our perfect fit person and kind of gross out anyone who's not our perfect fit. The best things we're writing in this posting, according to Leila, are things that attract some people and repel others, because once again, we are trying to treat our applicant and candidate world kind of like we would any other sales funnel. One tip that came up, particularly in the $100 million hiring strategy video, is making sure that you avoid cutesy things or anything that could kind of derail your progress in a specific job algorithm. So there are certain things that Indeed does not like when you put in a listing, or LinkedIn Jobs might not like. And if the algorithms don't like what you're doing, your post won't see as many people, which is not so good. So one of the things she pointed out was avoiding cutesy terms. For example, rather than customer success rock star, just say senior customer success manager. We don't need to be fancy. So getting back to this, we are ready for step 4 and 5 of our hiring process, which is reviewing and revising the copy. Once again, I put these in yellow because these are my own little insertions, because she's never mentioned in anything that I've seen that this happens, but I gotta think it happens. So here we are. I assume after you write the copy for your perfect fit, you build out that funnel, that job description, that advertisement, that you have some review and revision steps. Now, I would love to see Leila create a video explaining how exactly they dial in their copy to make sure it truly is the perfect fit. I mean, do they just publish it online and watch the results? Do they have somebody else on the company read over it? Do they have multiple people read it and give reactions? Do they go to the person who's in the job previously and get their opinion? I would love to know how this testing happens before the actual job description goes out into the wild. But for now, I will just leave it to say they probably happen in some way. But regardless of how quality assured or not the job listing is, we do know that after that, Leila is posting that job everywhere. When asked whether she focuses on certain areas or just referrals or anything else, Leila has said in multiple interviews, including this one here, that you may only have one shot to hire for a role. And especially if you don't have a ton of experience hiring for that specific type of person, you want to just give yourself the best chance you can get. And so she talks about at 23 minutes in this interview here about the importance of just spreading the word as broadly as possible. In the interviews I've seen, there doesn't seem to be one kind of through line of a specific type of sourcing technique that she's used more than others, but she's listed everything from job boards to LinkedIn to Indeed, the whole gambit. So if we're going to try to copy her style, probably do the same and just get the word out everywhere. One tip I have seen her mention in a few videos around this posting everywhere is to make sure that there's pretty low friction for getting people to apply toward the job. This to me was very refreshing, especially because I feel like there's a lot of HR advice out there right now talking about making as many tricks in your hiring process as you can, like having a secret word that people have to fill in to prove that they're paying attention, and other kind of childish games. So when she talked about making it very easy for people to enter your funnel of working for your company, I thought that was a great idea and something that we could all consider trying. Once you have your job listing posted, you're ready for the next 2 steps, which again, Leila didn't specifically talk about in any videos, so I'm just assuming they're here because they kind of have to be to make the rest of this make sense, which is collecting candidates and doing some kind of initial screen. I don't know the details of how, intense or not intense this is. Just based on context clues, my assumption is they're probably using some kind of simple ATS or even a CRM, client relationship management software, and treating this just like they would any other sales funnel. However, I haven't yet been able to find a really good interview where Leila talks about this approach, or even how aggressively, if at all, they do initial screening before the phone screens. So for now, this is kind of a loose area of the process that we're going to just fill in with our own defaults. Once we get that down though, we're ready for the next step, which is the first kind of interview focused step, which is the phone screen. This phone screen, I haven't gotten a straight answer in content yet. Maybe some of you can help me out on this. Whether she schedules these or they're impromptu, unscheduled, I'm not really sure. I know this is a hot topic in HR right now, but however they are done, that is Leila's first step in her hiring process, which is calling somebody up on the phone and asking them some basic questions. From what I've seen in her interviews, this is typically done by a hiring manager or an assistant. During this quick call, which I believe she's estimated to be less than 10 minutes, we're trying to get the answers to 5 questions. So number 1, is this the job they want? You may ask that outright or ask a little bit more subtly by saying, why are you interested in this role? Then you're trying to figure out, are they excited? This could be something that you can find out based on the first question you ask. And you're just trying to figure out if they're actually fired up about working for your company or if they're just applying for the job because their mom sent it to them, something like that. That's your second question. Third up, we're trying to figure out, is the pay that we're offering for this role aligned with what pay they actually need to survive? Because we don't want a big gap there to waste everybody's time going down a long hiring process only to realize that we are fundamentally in different ballparks. Then, in addition to that, we just want to check on logistics. This could be asking questions like, this is a remote full-time role. Does that work for you? Are you available from 9 to 5? Can you work weekends? This is a weekend job. Whatever the key logistical components of the job are, you want to just confirm them in this call, which can be very quick, just listing it off and asking for a yes or no. Last but not least, we have the weirdo check. And this is essentially, it's not a question we're going to ask. It's a vibe we're going to check for. And we want to confirm, according to Leila, that no one's sending off, red flags in our head, that's seeming off their rocker, or they're screaming into their phone because they're so angry at you for calling them. This check is something she stressed quite a few times in her different interviews and videos about this. So this seems to be one that she really focuses on when it comes to the phone screen. Once we have the phone screen, I'm assuming we have a bit of a screening step here. Never really heard her talk about this, but it would make sense, where we essentially want to ask, hey, are we still interested in this candidate based on what we learned in the phone screen? If so, we're going to move on. If not, we're going to send a rejection email. Now, both of these steps, I, again, haven't heard her really talk about the specifics of this process. I tried to dig around as much as I could. Couldn't really get a definitive answer, so we're just going to fill in the blanks best we can. I'm going to assume that just based on other videos that she's done, she's sending some kind of rejection email template if someone is not a fit at this point. I have a video on how to create these kinds of email templates on this channel. You can actually see up above that kind of outlines a general approach to doing these kinds of things in a standardized way. But based on some of the videos I've seen of Leila, I'm assuming this rejection email is really thorough. But if anyone here knows this information or happens to have found a rejection letter from working with Leila at some point, I would love to see it in the comments, because that would be a really cool detail to fill into this chart. Moving on, if somebody is a fit after the phone screen, I'm presuming they get some kind of invitation to schedule interview 1. I haven't heard any fancy stuff from Leila as to how this happens, so I'm assuming it's probably just an email with a Calendly link or something like that. Now, one tip I did pick up from Leila on this step, which is focused more on this video again at the 3-minute mark, is to be speedy about this interview. One of her quotes was that it takes 23 days for a company to find a perfect candidate, but it takes a top candidate typically 8 days. What? So if you are doing this invitation step, while I don't know exactly what this email should say to be Leila approved, I can say with fair amount of certainty that you're going to want to send that off quick, probably within 24 hours, if not less, of that first phone screen. So moving on here, we get to interview 1. What happens then? In Leila's world, this is what the first interview entails. It is one that is with just the hiring manager, one-on-one, and this interview covers the following topics. It's the history of the company, the experience the person has, the values of the company, and the expectations one has for the role. Again, you're basically reiterating the job description here, but with hopefully some more color to see how somebody reacts and understands that piece. Along with this review, you're looking a little bit into the future to re-explain how this role fits into the mission of the company, where are they heading, what's the larger plan, things that might have not been in that job description you want to hit in interview 1 to see if it resonates with the candidate. And after that, we're going to be asking some more subjective questions to kind of assess where the candidate is at. What is the candidate's experience? What are their values? What's their history? What's their mission? And more importantly than any specific answer, because there would be no right answer to these questions, we're looking for alignment with the culture the company already has. An example she gave in one of these videos is that if your company value is to operate very quickly, you might want to ask a question like this one here of how long does it take for you to answer your emails in the morning? There's no right or wrong answer, but understanding how somebody approaches that and what their normal is would help you get a sense as to whether they'll fit in very easily or with some struggle to your existing work culture. More on that inside this long form interview, but really that's the goal of interview 1. Basically reaffirm what's happening and get to know the human on the other side. Because again, we're not just dealing with candidates, this isn't like some kind of robotic process here. We're really trying to get to know the person at this point and assess, will they vibe here? Will they do well here? We want to be listening for that in interview 1 according to Leila's process. Moving on, we're having another proceed check. Again, these ones aren't really talked about in her process, but I'm assuming they're happening. So we're going to assess based on interview 1, do they move to interview 2? If so, we invite them to schedule the interview. And then we are here in interview 2. A lot of these tips are sourced from this video here on an interview framework, and they talk about the value of this second interview, which is going to be with both the hiring manager and key team member or members. If the first interview was all about figuring out who the candidate is and confirming we know who we are, interview 2 is really about making sure the person is capable of the work at hand. Assessing that fit is determined by 3 areas that you want to hit on in this interview. First, do their strengths match the role? Second, are their weaknesses acceptable for the role? And third, do they have proof? Do they have proof of their strength? Do they have proof of their abilities, and so on? I think these 3 things are really powerful because even if you have somebody who is capable of doing the job, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to thrive in the position. Having these 3 different pillars of aligned strengths, aligned weaknesses, and proof in the pudding is the magical piece of interview 2. One thing to note on this proof in the pudding step is that this might look different for different roles. According to the interviews I've seen, there are really 3 different assessments she might pull out of her pocket when it comes to getting proof of someone's abilities. One ideal is to get a portfolio. If that is not possible because you're hiring a strategic thinker or you're hiring a customer support role where you might not have a portfolio, the second thing she would do is conduct some kind of test project. So here are 3 example support tickets. How would you respond to them? Something like that. If a portfolio is not possible and a test project isn't really possible because maybe you're hiring a COO or an integrator, the third tool she'd pull out of her toolbox is situational questions. I've also heard her mention in some interviews that she'll mix and match these, so maybe you want to pull out all of them. But the situational questions would be something like, hey, this situation happened in the business, preferably something that actually happened in the past. And then you ask them, how would you handle that situation? Your goal is not to get a right or a wrong, but to just see how they think. Because when you're dealing with the more strategic level brains, according to Leila, you are hiring their brain. So you want to see how their brain functions. So these 3 pieces are the main components of interview number 2 that you'd want to schedule along the way. If that works out and you continue through another round of reviewing, screening, and inviting somebody ahead, you are on interview number 3. And interview number 3, according to Leila, is with the hiring manager and the CEO or gatekeeper. She's called this in a few interviews the gatekeeper interview. In this gatekeeper interview, your goal is to make sure that what the person actually wants fits with what the company actually needs in not just the short term, but the long term. So something that Leila mentions is that it could be valuable to bring in a CEO or a senior level thinker at this point, someone who can think beyond just the next 6 to 9 months in the role to make sure what this person is looking for will be a lasting fit for them into the future. According to Leila, again covered in the $100 million hiring strategy video, these are the things you're going to want to hit on. First up is confirming expectations. The example Leila gives is confirming what remote means in your company. It might mean something different in different people's places. We also want to discuss any issues that are so important that if someone messes them up or doesn't mesh with them, it would result in them being fired or quitting. Something like showing up to a meeting with no camera on might be a deal breaker for you. Or like I had happen, showing up on your first day of work in pajamas. That wouldn't be great. Or, for example, having a remote job and thinking that means you can only work 2 days a week and you still get paid full time. Also have had that happen. These kinds of things you want to get ahead of and talk about in this interview so you don't have the crappy experiences that I have had by not following Leila's process on this piece. Those are the 2 components. The 3 additional pieces are checking for alignment. Again, are their personal goals of what they want in life fitting with the company? Do their personal values fit with the company? Are they the right level of competitive? Are they enough of a learner? Are they generous enough? Whatever those things are, do their values match the company? Because man, that'll make it a lot easier for them to mesh. Finally, we're at this part. This step is all about highlighting what isn't so good about working at your company. And I love this part. It's one I'm definitely going to steal. What she talks about in her videos is about how throughout the whole hiring process, you're really treating it like a sales funnel, right? You want to get people in. Come on, apply. Our job is amazing, right? Back here, we talked about selling the culture. At interview 3, you're actually flipping gears and you are trying to actively deter people who will be afraid of hard work, afraid of things being imperfect. You want to try to pop the bubble of optimism so people really see what it's like, potentially even more negatively than it really is, to make sure you're not just getting people who are fair weather friends into your business. Something she's talked about in videos like this one right here is highlighting the job as 5% worse than it actually is. So if things are a little messy, you might go into this interview and say, no, they're really messy. If your SOPs are a little out of date, you might go into the interview and say, oh my gosh, none of them are up to date. Essentially, you want to sell the job as worse than it is, so that way when people actually come in, they're pleasantly surprised, and you're deterring anybody who is afraid of things being a little messy. This mindset of highlighting the pains and problems that the role is supposed to solve is a through line from back here in the very early stages of hiring, where we wanted to focus on the pain we need solved. From the beginning to the end, Leila's focus is making sure that you hire people who are ready and able and willing and excited to solve the pain, not just people who want to come into your perfect little orbit and just float around. Right? And that's the through line between these 2 points. All right, so moving on to interview 4, which is our next thing we want to schedule here. We've got our final interview of the process, which Leila calls the CEO interview. Now, keep in mind, just like all of these steps, we may not have these if we have a really small team. We might just have 2 interviews or 3 interviews. But this is kind of the full process she outlines. And interview 4 in her larger team environment is with the CEO if they're not already in interview 3. This 4th interview, which Leila calls the CEO interview, is really more of a future looking interview. It's the future of the role. It's the future of the company. It's painting the big picture. If we think about interview 3 as the reality check of like, oh, look, here's all the reasons our company sucks. Interview 4 is about re-icing that cake that you just took a little sample from and showing how amazing things could be in the future. In this interview, it's usually just with the CEO, according to her, and it includes these 3 pieces. We want to highlight the future prognosis for this role. For example, hey, if you join us as our newest sales rep, you could eventually become our senior sales rep or our marketing lead or this or that or the other. Just giving perspective areas where this role could develop. And she hasn't said this, but I'm assuming there's this baked in assumption that you could highlight the way this role could grow based on the person you're specifically speaking to. So if you are hiring somebody who's really interested in marketing, but you're hiring them for a sales role, you could highlight opportunities for where this sales role could grow in a direction that they're really interested in. Next up, we've got confirming expectations again. So this will be things like, again, here's the role, here's what remote means to us, and also here's what we would be looking for at the 30, 60, and 90 mark. More on this 30, 60, 90 is really covered in the onboarding process, according to Leila, but she does mention talking about it here in the final interview, just to, again, paint that future vision. Once again, we do have that little sprinkling of salt here where we highlight the ways the job might not all be perfect in that first 30, 60, and 90 days. And as a final reminder here, and something that's hit on in this video, is to make sure at this final stage, we're not getting blinded by similarities, thinking, oh, because you're like me, you must be great. While many of the steps in this process opens us up to potential bias, particularly for this last one where we're talking about the future, we want to be paying objective attention to what that person seems to want and whether or not what we're painting is honest, truthful, and truly going to work for both the company and the person, again, according to Leila. Now, after that 4th interview, we are ready to wrap up our hiring process with our final few steps, first of which is another screening step. Hey, do we still want to proceed after interview 4? If so, move on. Then we want to extend that job offer. Again, this is in yellow because I haven't really heard Leila talk about how she goes about extending an offer, but that would be really cool to see more videos about. For the time being, I'm assuming it's just some kind of email and document package. And then after that, we have some kind of metrics review. I haven't heard Leila specifically talk about how this looks, but she's mentioned enough things about tracking results and pieces around this that I have to think some kind of funnel analysis happens for her after she closes a job process to see if they've done a good job or not so great a job on the hiring journey. Finally, from here, we end the hiring process and we start the onboarding process because according to Leila, particularly in this video here, the onboarding process for a new employee doesn't begin when they start working for you. It starts the moment they agree to work with you with that hiring offer extended. So all of that onboarding stuff starts happening immediately. And by the way, I know this video is all about attracting new talent and hiring, and it's Leila Hormozi's hiring process, but in researching this video, I actually found a bunch of nuggets around how Leila approaches retention, engagement, and onboarding, and I kind of thought it could be cool to do a video on her suggested onboarding process in case we can learn anything from that as well. But let's just wrap up with some one-off tasks, some one-time things that Leila suggests that you do if you are setting up this hiring process. Obviously, something you want to do is steal this hiring process, which you are welcome to do. But in addition to that, there are also some actions that she kind of assumes that are in place that if you don't have them, you may want to do them as a one-time task when you're getting ready to hire for the first or next time. The first one-off task is creating some kind of hiring funnel, some kind of way to accept applicants to your job. I happen to know that Indeed has one built right into the software, but if you're feeling fancy, maybe you want to create your own landing pages and lead collection forms or whatever else that is. Regardless of how you do it, you want to have some way to be able to collect, sort, and engage applicants in some way, shape, or form. Leila's suggestion would be to also incorporate some kind of paid traffic strategy into this, particularly if you have competency there like they do. That could be a good way to go. And the second step, if you don't get enough Leila in your life, is to subscribe to the other Leila. Yes, that is me. If you'd like more information about how to define the processes in your business, how to use software to wrangle this whole process, and how to structure the delegation so your new hires know what they're actually doing, that's what we cover on this channel. And in addition to maybe some part 2 videos, if you guys comment the word onboarding below, we have a ton of videos on the channel to help you organize your team operations in easy to apply, lightweight ways, and you would get more of those videos by subscribing. All right, moving on. The next step that we suggest you do is also get some practice in. Something Leila talks about in a lot of her videos is about making sure you're taking time to get experience. Don't narrow down all of your interviews to just 2 interviews and 2 candidates, especially if you haven't hired many times before. Having a lot of interviews will help you hone your craft, help you, tailor your bullshit reader, help you really figure out who is and is not a fit by getting that muscle memory down. And that's something that Leila really harps on throughout her videos. If you do not have time to have 1,000 interviews in the next week because you might be mid-hiring, the other option is to also hire somebody who has thousands of interviews under their belt. For example, here at ProcessDriven, I have not yet had 1,000 interviews under my belt, and I'm really trying to build this skill. So actually, Vanessa here, you see pictured on the screen, Vanessa helps us for our hiring process here, and I'm able to sit in on interviews with her, get her expert facilitation, and I'm able to learn at the same time. So also shameless plug for Vanessa, who's amazing. If you're looking for somebody who could be your hiring manager for your company to partner with you as the business owner, someone like Vanessa is a great resource to look at. Just be sure to let her know I sent you and do not steal her from me. So moving on from hiring manager, the last step I would do as a one-off task just based on watching this video, and this is one from me, not from Leila Hormozi, is to template this process. I cannot tell you how many times I have watched videos with great strategies and I watch them and I think, that's awesome. And then I don't do anything with them. Please don't make this one of these videos. Take what I'm showing you right here. Take the process map that we have and put it inside your task management tool of choice. Make it a checklist you can reference in the future. Make it something that's really convenient for you that the next time you're going to hire, you can just boop, 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 load up the Leila Hormozi hiring process and implement it in your business. So you're not reinventing the wheel. You're not trying to remember this video. You've got it right there where you need to go. If you're looking for more information about templating a process, you can watch this video up here where we talk about how to do that in some general work management software. And if you'd like some kind of PDF with this workflow map so you can easily copy and paste it into your tool of choice, just drop me a comment below and we'll figure out some way to get it to you. Now, I think I said that was the last one, but I lied. There's actually one more here. And that's to make sure you have a task to remind you to make this better over time. As you might have noticed when we went through this flow here, there are a lot of areas where I wasn't fully clear on what Leila's approach is. And she's constantly creating new videos that give us new insights, and we're all learning things every single day. So if you have the ability, create some kind of task for yourself to review this, revise this, rethink this over time. That way your process, much like Leila Hormozi's process, I assume, isn't just static. It's continuously improving as you learn new things, get new ideas, and maybe have some unpleasant experiences that help you channel what you really want your hiring process to be. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how cool the Hormozis seem online. It doesn't matter what Leila Hormozi's process is. What matters is that you have some kind of hiring process that delivers the end result, aka the type of hires that are going to thrive in your team. And that's probably different than the Hormozi's team. It's different than my team. It's unique to you. And the only way you're going to make this process what your team needs it to be is to make sure that you're making space to turn it into what your team needs it to be. For more info about how to iterate your processes to make your business more systemized, I know that's a lot of buzzwords, you can watch this video up here. And if you'd like to keep learning with myself and Chuck and Marge in the meantime, check out this video on the end screen where we go through how you can fix a disorganized business culture by just tweaking little parts of your daily communication processes. Until next time, enjoy the process. Don't make me laugh. How long? Let's try that again.